Hey guys, Blue here. Happy New Year to everyone. So Nemesis has arrived, and when I recorded that gameplay, I wanted to put him in several fights, including a few fights where he would do very, very well, like where he can copy very strong melee buffs, as well as a fight or two where it's more complicated, like in that fight against the Brawler Shark. I knew that would be a very long fight, but I wanted to record it because it shows where things are complicated for him, right? So in a fight like that, where the opponent can gain lots of armor buffs, it's difficult for Nemesis because even though he can nullify those buffs, he can't keep up if the opponent is gaining, 7, 8, 9 armor buffs. He can only nullify one at a time. At the same time, though, I did want to show that second clip of the Brawler Shark fight where I fought him again, because in a fight like that, the one advantage that Nemesis has is that he can copy really strong armor buffs like that, right? So in that second clip where I showed Nemesis getting hit a lot, right, he was taking almost no damage because he can copy those really strong armor buffs, right? And so because Nemesis is all about the copying of buffs, that's where he really shines. I wanted to showcase him in a few different fights that show his strengths as well as where things are a little bit trickier, okay? So I wanted to go over him a little bit in case you're curious about him. And Nemesis is the most circumstantial bot in the game, meaning that he is really good in certain kinds of fights and much less effective in everything else. And so generally speaking, you want to use him in very particular fights, particularly related to bots and mods where he can copy melee and armor buffs, right? That's where he's really going to shine, okay? And so I did go ahead and rank 5 him. At this point, I'm only ranking up bots for fun, and I've always kind of liked him. I like that his kit is a little bit weird and different. Frankly, he also just looks cool, I love this red and black color scheme. They did a really great job with his design. He is definitely not the most effective tactician, that is for sure. But he has his uses, and he can be fun to play with. And so his SIG allows for healing on specials based upon the amount of damage that he does. Now, this SIG does not scale well at all. So at SIG 50, he's repairing 22% of the damage he deals. This only goes up to 25% at SIG 100. So you have to be mindful of that. Obviously, it's very easy to get bots up to high SIG in this new version. So if you are going to use him a lot, why not? But bear in mind that it does max out at 25% of the damage he deals. The healing that he does is very contingent upon what kind of buffs, or if there are any buffs, that he's able to copy, right? Particularly melee buffs, right? And so if you're going up against a brawler or a lane in the story or something like that where there's a 600% melee mod, if he can copy that and then land a special, the healing is amazing, right? He can go from low health to high health. But in most normal fights where he's not copying melee buffs, the healing is going to be fairly minimal because Nemesis's base attack is not very high. It's just okay. And so if you're going up against, any other kind of bot or lane that doesn't have melee buffs to copy, you're generally going to heal maybe a few percent, maybe 2, 3, 4%. So it helps you out a little bit, but you can't expect really big healing with his SIG unless you're in the kind of fight that he's best for, right? Against brawlers and melee and armor mods, etc., etc. Okay? So Dark Energy and the Subspace Impulse Cloner, right? That allows for copying of buffs and so forth. These are the abilities that go up with rank, right? So he passively generates Dark Energy every 10 seconds. He can stack up to 10 of these charges, so it is a bit slow. However, there is one way to kind of speed it up a little bit. He also gains Dark Energy more quickly as he loses health. He gets a 10% increased crit rate against Autobots and a little bit of armor piercing against Decepticons. When it comes to the copying of buffs, right, bear in mind, first of all, that he only copies melee and armor buffs. This is a little bit disappointing for us. We were hoping that he would get a buff that would allow him to copy all kinds of buffs because he's very limited here. So unlike a bot like Megatron, first of all, Nemesis only copies buffs. He does not steal them like Megatron does. Also, unlike Megatron, he cannot copy or steal lots of buffs, right? Megatron can steal all kinds of buffs, and the S1000 can copy all kinds of buffs Nemesis cannot. So that is a little bit disappointing. However, there is one small change here, which is a good thing. So even though Nemesis's kit is basically the same as in the old game, one thing we have noticed is that he is now more easily able to copy lots of these buffs and stack them. So if you're going up against, let's say, a low health Motor Master, you can copy with Nemesis, all of those melee buffs. Or a bot like Tantrum, or a bot like Ironhide, any bot that has lots of melee or armor buffs, Nemesis can copy lots of them, which is cool, right? And that is a bit different than it was in the old game. However, you have to remember, he's only copying melee and armor, nothing else. So with that said, he has a 25% chance to copy a melee or armor buff, and that chance goes up by 5% with each charge of dark energy. So the more dark energy you have, the higher the chance is. Now you have to remember here that with the copying of buffs, okay, it is RNG based. So the good thing is it's passive, you don't have to do anything, but it's not in your control. So sometimes you're gonna copy a buff right away. Sometimes you might not copy a buff at all in a fight, especially if it's a shorter fight, right? Obviously in longer fights, he's gonna have a lot more opportunity to copy buffs, and he'll usually copy many of them, especially if it is a very long fight. But in short fights, sometimes you're going to copy no buffs, sometimes you're going to copy melee, sometimes it'll be armor, sometimes it'll be both. You just don't know. So you do have to remember that at the end of the day, it is RNG based, and so sometimes you'll have really good luck with it, sometimes you won't. His heavies are useful because he will always nullify a melee or armor buff on the opponent if they have one. So you can, nullify over and over again with his heavy. And he also gets a 5% attack boost for each charge of dark energy. So if you have a lot of dark energy, his heavies are very useful in general because he gets a nice attack boost with them. With his specials, they're interesting. His special 1 and 2 are much more effective than his special 3, and we'll talk about that. With the special 1 and passively, he has a 30% chance to copy each debuff on him to the opponent, and the chance goes up with each charge of dark energy. Now, what this means, of course, is it's only copying debuffs. He's not transferring them, so they will remain on him, but any debuff that's on Nemesis, an armor break, a crit rate debuff, DOT, anything like that, he does have the ability to copy to the opponent so that they are affected as well. And with the special 1, he gains 2 charges of dark energy. So this is the one way to kind of speed up the dark energy process. So in general, it's usually best to use a special 1 first to get a little bit more dark energy early in the fight. Okay? His special 2 is his most effective special, generally speaking. It does the most damage. He has a 50% chance to nullify either a melee or an armor buff. And he can apply a 5% attack debuff or a 5% armor break for 4 seconds. And of course, the chance on this goes up by 5% for each charge of dark energy. If he does nullify any buffs, he loses 3 dark energy charges. Now, this is the other area where a lot of us are disappointed, and we were hoping that he would get a buff. And that relates to his armor break. He has a very weak, pretty bad armor break. So a 5% armor break for 4 seconds is the weakest armor break in the game. Most armor breaks are between 20 and 40%, and they last longer. This is almost useless. It really doesn't do anything for you. It's also short, and it's unfortunate. I was hoping that he would get a much more consistent and reliable and frankly good armor break on all of his specials in order to help him out. Because even though he can nullify, which is useful, armor breaks serve slightly different purposes and they can be very helpful. So the fact that he only has this very brief, weak armor break and only on his special 2 isn't great. So you have to bear that in mind. He does not have the armor breaking power at all of a bot like Megatron or OGP, or most of the other tacticians, Ultra Magnus, Starscream, etc. I mean, his armor break is bad. It's not very helpful. So you just have to bear that in mind. His special 3, he gets a buff where basic attacks are unblockable for 7 seconds, and that can go up a little bit with each charge of dark energy after he uses it. In general, though, I would stay away from the special 3 because, first of all, you lose all of your dark energy. Yes, you can charge it back up again, but it takes time. More importantly, though, the special 3 does not do anything particularly interesting for him. Unblockable attacks are fine, but they're not really that helpful. And his special 3 has no other additional abilities that will help you out. There's no nullification, no armor break, no DOT like bleed or shock or anything. And frankly, the special 3 is not a very strong special. It doesn't do that much damage. So in most cases, I would stay away from the special 3, stick to the special 1s and 2s, and remember that using the special 1 early is usually a good idea because it helps you get more of those dark energy charges. Okay, so his kit is a little bit elaborate, but it's not very complicated because a lot of his kit is passive, right? He's gaining dark energy passively. He's also copying buffs passively, right? Things like that. You know, you're always going to get at least a little bit of healing when you use the specials, right? So you don't have to do a lot with him. You just have to remember a few things related to dark energy and related to the specials that you're using. And so because his kit is very circumstantial, right? You want to use him against any bots that have lots of melee and armor buffs in particular, right? So clearly all the brawlers for sure, Ultra Magnus, Rodimus, bots that have those kinds of buffs he's going to do well on, as well as fighting against melee and armor lanes, right? Mods he can also copy, right? And so those are the kinds of fights that he's going to do super well in. In every other kind of fight, he's just okay at best, right? You can still use him. He'll do fine. But he's not going to do anything special outside of the fights that he's designed for. So in terms of the practicality of what's available for him, there are a bunch of lanes in the story, like I showed in a few of the fights I recorded, where he could do well, right? There are several melee-based lanes, right? Melee mods that increase damage a lot. There are armor mods. And there are lanes that have, let's say, lots of brawlers that he can fight. So there are some lanes in the story where he can do well. In terms of AMs, he's only really going to do well on one lane, and that's 1.3, okay? The Tantrum lane. Because on that lane, well, Tantrum, Sunny, and Ironhide all have lots of melee and armor buffs that he can copy. And there's also that really amazing 400% melee buff from the mod that he can also copy. So if you fight that lane, you start copying those buffs, his attack's going to go way up and you can decimate, the opponents on that lane. He could do very well on 1.3, and I've already heard from a few people who've had success there. He's not really going to do well on any other lane in particular, including 3.1, by the way, the armor lane in room 3 with Primal. I also had a couple friends try him out, and he was basically useless, at least at higher levels, because first of all, there's not a whole lot of melee buffs to copy. Primal does not heavy all that often, and even when he does, you'd have to copy it right away, which you often wouldn't. You might copy Grimm's melee buff, but Grimm's not going to be stacking lots of melee buffs in that fight because Nemesis does not have DOT like bleed or shock or anything. And so the point is, on 3.1, even though Nemesis can nullify the mod, right, the armor mod, the 90% armor, which is helpful, first of all, it's always going to come right back. And more importantly, Nemesis cannot do anything about the healing, right? And so because of the fact that he has very weak armor break, he has no DOT, he doesn't really have a way to sort of break through the mod. So if you use him against a bot like Primal on 3.1, even if you whittle him down a little bit, he's just going to heal right back up again over and over again. So he's not useful there. And like I said, he's not going to be particularly good on any other lane except 1.3. So if you do 1.3 and you want to try a different bot out, Nemesis would certainly be worth a look, as well as I said, some lanes in the story. Otherwise, he's just not going to perform all that well because that's the nature of his kit, okay? In terms of synergies, the good thing about him is the fact that he is a Decepticon, which means that he does benefit from all of the Decepticon synergies like Hand of Chaos and Seekers. He doesn't have many individual synergies. In fact, he only has a couple. So this one he has with OGP actually gives Nemesis armor. These synergies with Cyclo and Galvatron are actually not mutual except Hand of Chaos. But he does have this pretty good one where he gets 6% power gain with Shockwave. So Nemesis does not have many individual synergies, but because he benefits from the Decepticon synergies, there are certain things that you can do with him, and you can put him into, interesting teams if you're using a lot of Decepticons. So that's Nemesis for you guys. You know, I'll use him sometimes just for fun. You definitely do not need to rank him up. You know, he's not an essential bot by any means, especially if you're using some of the other tacticians. But if you're looking for a new tactician or just kind of a different bot to use, Nemesis can be a lot of fun in the right circumstances. So I hope this has been helpful, guys. Do let me know if you have any questions, and we will be in touch again soon. Take care.